I would like to thank Professor KARFA for choosing me to chair this webinar session entitled English for Specific Purposes that will be delivered by Professor Saadin Akhjam from the University of Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah Fas. Today, I am pleased to chair this session, and I'd like to welcome all our professors from this university as well as other universities. I would like also to welcome my dear classmates from the master program, Applied Language Studies and Research in Higher Education. I hope you enjoyed this session. Please, Professor Slawi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fatem Zahra Saudi. Once again, I would like to welcome our guest speaker, Professor Akhjam Saadin, who is going to talk about English for specific purposes to our MA students. And I would also welcome our colleagues from the Department of English, Professor Bqali and the other professors, as well as all other colleagues from other Moroccan universities that may join us. We have also here other professors from Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah. We will also welcome our students from the MA and the doctoral program. And we also would like to thank Professor KARFA once again for this very fascinating webinars he is organizing for in favor of our students. So thank you very much, Professor KARFA. Yeah. So
thank you, Professor Slawi. Yeah. Please, Professor KARFA, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatem Zahra. Thank you very much, Professor Slawi.
Yes.
Dear colleagues, MA students and PhD students, English for specific purposes is another important issue in applied linguistics. And there is an increasing interest and in and need for English for specific purposes, for it helps to bridge the gap between the Moroccan education system in general and particularly educational English language education and the socio-economic sector. So ASP and teaching ASP, integrating ASP in higher education, in institutions of higher education, is an important aspect of the way education and English language education can best contribute to integrate youth and graduates into the job market. Saadin Akhjam will enlighten us on this topic, particularly that he has conducted his PhD on English for specific purposes in Morocco in general and in engineering institutions of higher education. And he studied different aspects and connections between these institutions and the English for specific purposes and the job market. And to my knowledge, it is the first PhD on English for specific purposes in Morocco. I'm sure Saadin Akhjam will enlighten us on different issues concerning English language education, ASP, and how it can help to bridge the gap between graduates, particularly from engineering schools in Morocco, and the job market. Abdelmajid, Saadin Akhjam. Yes, Fatem Zahra, you can give Saadin the floor. to start.
Thank you, Professor. Please, the floor is for our guest speaker, Professor Saaddin Akhjam.
Thank you, Professor Slawi. Thank you, Professor Abderrahim Al-KARFA. Thank you, Ms. Fatim Zahra, for sharing this webinar. By the way, can you see my slides or?
No, not yet. No.
Okay, 1 second. Is it okay now?
Not yet, no.
No?
No.
Okay, how about now?
No, Professor, not yet.
Okay, so I think there is, I don't know, probably there is a technical problem because I tried to share, but it doesn't work, I guess. Anyone to help for this technicality?
McKay? McKay?
Yes, sir.
McKay?
Yeah.
Yes, can you?
Saaddin.
Oui, yes.
Can you help?
Yeah, you can click on partager l'écran.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, but first you have to open the document beforehand before doing.
You have to get it
Okay.
open, yeah.
So as to have the presentation shown
Have
on the screen.
access to it, yes.
Yeah.
I did, but I think
Saaddin,
yes,
did you open the presentation?
yes, I did, yes.
Leave it open?
Yes.
All right, so now you have to move into partager l'écran.
So shall I go back to the?
Yeah, partager l'écran, and you will have a list of the documents you have just opened.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a message which says that le partager d'écran n'a pas pu démarrer. Veuillez réessayer ultérieurement. Code d'erreur 10:35.
Yes, Professor Saaddin, maybe the internet connection is low.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
the internet.
Okay, so Okay, let me try once again.
Dean,
Yes, sir, I think so. I don't know.
you can go without it if it is not possible.
Well, I tried, but in vain. So I don't know whether it's a problem of connection or it's another technical problem. I don't know, because the internet is okay. I opened the slides and I clicked on partager. Unless we can do without. So
Yeah, you can do without if it is not possible. So
I tried, but in vain. So I don't know what is the problem exactly.
Mr. Saadin, I have a potential solution for you. You can just send us the presentation
Okay.
via email, and then someone of us will share his screen, and then you can take charge of the rest. You see what I mean?
Okay, fine. So, okay, fine. Okay. So I will send it to whom?
Okay. I can give you my email. I can take charge of that.
All right. I will immediately send it to you.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you privately.
Sure.
All right, so it is sent.
Yes. Okay, received. So. Okay, Sibnima, have you received my email? Have you received the presentation?
Yes, yes. I've just received it. I'm going to open it.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Si Mohammed.
Welcome.
Okay, that's fine now. Okay.
Okay, is it clear now, or should I remove something?
For
No,
me,
it's
yes, it's
okay.
clear.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay, so I can, play it slide by slide when you are present.
Okay, all right. So you can follow me, and you have at least about 1 minute or 2 minutes for each slide. So once I am done, you can move to the second slide. So, and I highly appreciate Si Mohammed for your help.
You're very welcome.
Well, I would like to reiterate my thanks to Professor Slawi, Miss Fatim Zara for the moderating this seminar. I would like also to thank also Professor Abderrahim Al-KARFA for his invitation, and I'm very glad and honored to present my talk today in front of you, which is titled ASP and needs analysis, because when we talk about ASP, of course, we should highlight things related to needs analysis, because needs analysis is the backbone of ASP. So ASP needs analysis is very interesting while talking about ASP. Well, I will share with you the outline that will follow in this presentation. So I will first of all talk briefly about the history of ASP. So it's going to be just a general history of ASP. How did it emerge? And then I will move to talk about what is ASP exactly, the role of ASP teacher, which is very fundamental. Knowing about the role of ASP teacher is very critical in an ASP class. Needs analysis or needs assessment, both of them are used interchangeably when we talk about needs analysis or needs assessment, so it's the same. We'll talk also about approaches to ASP course design, so how to design ASP courses. What are the main approaches that an ASP teacher should know while designing ASP course? And then I will move to ASP in Morocco, which is in fact, as Professor KARFA said, it's in fact, I will try to share with you my findings that related to my PhD thesis that I conducted a few years ago, and they defended, I guess, several months ago. And of course, I will end up by a conclusion. So concerning the reasons for the emergence of ASP, and of course, this is according to Hutchinson and Watchers in 1987. So it's because of three main reasons. So the first one is demands of brave new words. So after the Second World War, there was a growth in commerce, technology, and economics. So there was a need of a common language of exchange. So this is the first one. The second one is revolution in linguistics, which is there was a shift of attention to discover the ways in which language is actually used in real communication. And of course, it is known by one of the main slogans of ASP that was developed by Hutchinson and Watcher, which is, tell me what you need English for, and they will tell you the English you need. So this becomes the guiding principle of ASP. And the second main reason is the focus on the learner. So this has led to the development in education psychology and the importance of learners' needs, interests, and objectives towards the learning of English language. So which means that the learner is given much attention while while designing ASP in general. Yes, Mohammed? So we should know what is an ASP first. So ASP is an approach to ALT, or to English language teaching, and it is an organizing English language programs in such a way that the content of the courses offered is relevant to the specific needs of specific group of learners. And typically, so this approach consists first is on identification of needs. So which means that we cannot indulge in an ESP course unless we identify the needs of students. And we'll talk later on about these needs. What is these needs exactly? The second phase is production of the materials. Once we conduct the needs analysis, we should know, or we should pick up what teaching material should be adopted and that should meet the needs of those specific group of learners. And the third phase is the teaching process. So I should know what to teach and how to teach and when to teach an ESP course. And the last thing, of course, is testing. So testing, it's evaluating. So it's evaluating our teaching methodology, it's evaluating courses and so on. And of course, assessment and evaluation, Professor Blagiti and Sibouzian, they deeply and detailedly talked about the issue of assessment and evaluation. So ESP is also interested in investigating needs, preparing authentic teaching materials. So it's not only about teaching materials, but it's authentic teaching materials. It means that these teaching materials that are used or adopted, they should be authentic. And of course, purposes related orientation. This ESP course is goal oriented, means that we don't teach whatever we want, just the way we want, but we should have an objective to be achieved. Devising appropriate teaching methodology. So what is the appropriate teaching methodology to adopt? In the literature, according to many researchers, so they claim that CLT is the most appropriate teaching method. But but in this modern time, CLT alone is not enough. But there are other teaching methods that should be also used in an ESP class, like project-based learning, task-based learning, and so on and so forth. Providing the maximum possible support in the time, the limited time available, so which means that you should be given enough time to those ESP courses. Yes, Sebastian? So here we have to ask the question, which is, what is the role of an ESP teacher? So the role of the ESP teacher is totally different from the role of AEP teacher or AGP teacher, because when we talk about ALT, so we have got AGP, ASP, and AEP. So AEP is for English for academic purposes. So what we study at the faculty, for example, those students who are specialized in English studies at the faculty, so they are taking AEP courses. AGP is English for general purposes, and ASP is English for specific purposes. And of course, this ESP is divided into English, and we have many disciplines in ASP, like English for business communication, English for commerce, English for engineering, and so on and so forth. So the role of this ESP teacher, the first thing is that you should conduct needs analysis. So which means he is the one in charge of conducting needs analysis or needs assessment. Design teaching materials. Also, he is responsible for designing teaching materials. His job also, or her job, is to meet the needs of different learners. And here we talk about individual differences and also the needs of different learners, because of course in ESP class, many students have different needs. So the job of the ESP teacher is to meet different needs for each student in the ESP class. Coordinate with other teachers. And when we talk about coordinating, so it's not only coordinating with language teacher, but also with content teachers, because for example, if we are, for example, in engineering school, so that teacher who is teaching ESP course, he should coordinate with teachers who are teaching engineering, okay? And this is kind of team teaching, and it is one also of the very important thing in ESP, is coordinating and team teaching exactly. Reading about new developments in the field, So his job is always to update his knowledge in the field. If he's teaching, for example, in business, he's teaching commerce, for example, or engineering, he should always read, okay, or she should read about new emerging issues in the field that he's teaching. It could be, for example, engineering, commerce, and so on. He's also responsible, or is also in charge of evaluating students using formative and in a formative and summative way. Also, he is in charge of, or she is in charge of performing action and classroom research. And action research, there are kinds of research that are conducted in the classroom where, of course, teachers don't generalize results, but they are meant to solve immediate problems that could emerge in the classroom. She is also a coordinator when we talk about coordinating. So it's coordinating with not only with language or content teachers, but it's also with, for example, the institution, probably decision makers, syllabus designers, and. He is also a friend, or she is also a friend with students who are taking ASP course. He is also a monitor, a mentor, leader, and so on and so forth. So he is playing different roles in that ASP class. Yes. So now we should know, we should know what is needs analysis. So needs analysis is what? So it's a process of identifying performance requirements and the gap between what performance is required and what presently exists. So the job, or the ultimate objective of conducting needs analysis, is to identify the gaps. Means that I should know what to teach to those group of learners, how to teach, and when to teach as well. And it is also needs assessment or needs analysis is the process of identifying and measuring areas of improvement in a target audience and determining the methods to achieve improvement. And we talk about the areas of improvement is like, for example, I know that these students they should develop their speaking skill. It means that, so the job of the speech teacher is to give much importance to speaking skill rather than other language skill. Or for example, content. Those students would like to study, for example, only things related to English for engineering. So I should teach those students English for engineering, not other content that is not relevant to their needs. And of course, in the literature, so it is the cornerstone of ASP, means that the teacher should not teach an ASP class unless he or she conducts needs analysis. And it is an essential step in course design. Before the ASP teacher designs an ASP course, he should conduct these needs analysis, because it is through the needs analysis, okay, we can design the appropriate course design. And we are going to see in a few minutes, these types of course design. Yes, so the needs analysis, there are many times that the ASP teacher can conduct it. For example, at the first step, it was the first step before we indulge or before we start any ASP course. So this, it is the beginning of the course, so it should be conducted. And it is also ongoing. So it's during the course design. For example, in the middle, I can conduct needs analysis, whether, for example, at least I have achieved my predetermined objectives that I set in the beginning. So if I achieve this objective, so I can carry on. If not, I can conduct needs analysis and to see what are other things that I should, for example, include in the ASP course as to meet the needs of students. Because by the end, the objective is to meet the needs of students, is not the perceived need of the teacher. Sometimes it's also after the course, means at the end, whether I have achieved my objectives, okay? So whether all the objectives that I set, are they achieved at the end of the course or not? So which means that this needs analysis can be conducted in the beginning, in the middle, and or after the ASP course. So what are these target needs? These target needs are what? So it is composed of necessities, lacks, and wants. So necessities are what? So it's what the learner needs to know in order to function effectively in the target situation. And lacks is what the learner already knows and doesn't know. So it's like I'm conducting, it's like a kind of diagnostic test. I know what are his problems or her problems. What are the things, what are his, the main, I would say, areas of problems that this person should develop, whether they are, for example, they could be, for example, good at speaking, and they would like to, and they are, for example, bad at writing. So here my objective is to improve their writing skill. Another type of target need is wants, is what the learner feels or needs. So what are his, it's like, what are his perceived or his personal interests? What are his personal needs that they wish to develop in that ESP course? So it is therefore important to highlight the main approaches to needs analysis. And there are many approaches, and there are 6 main approaches that we can develop, okay, or they can use while conducting needs analysis. So the first one is target situation analysis. And it is the focus of needs analysis is on students' needs at the end of a language course. It provides a guide as what language to teach. So here it's like I try to meet the needs of students by the end of the course. At the end, what are the things that should be achieved? What are the things that should be improved? For example, the students at, for example, engineering, they should be good, they should improve their writing skill. And again, I should ask what types of writing skill, what are other sub-skills that could develop? Is it writing reports? Is it writing memos, for example? Is it writing, I don't know, articles and so on and so forth. Another type of approach is present situation analysis. And by the way, these approaches, they can be used in the teaching process or for research. If I would like to conduct a needs analysis in my research, I can take into consideration these approaches. And the same thing in ESP course while teaching in the ESP course. So the second one is present situation analysis. It seeks to establish what the students are like at the start of their language course, investigating their strength and their weaknesses. So here it's like conducting diagnostic tests. What are problems that the students, what are their weaknesses and what are their strengths? The third main approach is deficiency analysis, which aims to fill the gap between present needs and target needs. So the job of present deficiency analysis is bridging the gap between present needs and target needs. And its main goal, its main objective is to bridge the gap between present and target extra-linguistic knowledge. So which means like, it's also accuracy of general English, language skills, and learning strategy. The fourth is strategy analysis, which aims to extend the process of needs analysis from what to teach, okay, content, for example, into how to teach. So here it's, for example, I know what kinds of content those students need, but what types of teaching methodology that they can adopt? So am I going to use, for example, communicative language teaching? Am I going to use project-based learning? Am I going to use this and that? The second one is means analysis, which involves a study of the teachers, teaching methods, students, faculties, so as to see how the language course can be implemented. So here it's like all, I would say, practitioners work together to provide the necessary teaching materials, teaching methods, for example, teaching strategies that can be adopted so as to meet the needs of those students. The third is job and task analysis, which aims to determine the needed abilities that include knowledge, skills, tools, conditions, and requirements in order to perform the job appropriately. So here it's like I'm trying to guide students or the learners into the job market. So I'm teaching those students these kinds of content, these kinds of skills so that they can be used in the socioeconomic sector. Of course, to gather information about target needs, so we have different ways that the teacher or researcher can use to gather information. That could be questionnaires, interviews, focus group, self-assessment, and observation. And sometimes, most of the time, or sometimes what happens is that some ESP teachers, they use what is called ad hoc analysis. So ad hoc analysis, it's like an informal way, okay, of conducting needs analysis. For example, I just come to class and I ask students, what would like to study? What would like to improve? Would you like to improve your speaking skill? So it's like just, it's not standardized, it's not predetermined, it's not pre-prepared, but it's just, I come and they ask, would you like to prove this? Would you like to study this? And so on. So it is an ad hoc analysis. And now we'll move to approaches to ASP course design. So there are three main approaches that ASP teachers should take into consideration before designing ASP course. So the first one is language-centered course design, skills-centered course design, and learning-centered course design. So concerning language-centered course design, it's yes, please, Cynthia. So this approach uses the learner as a means. So here means that we use the learner as a means to know what to teach and what not to teach, for what register to use, what discourse, what genre, what types of genre to be used also in the classroom. So here it uses the learner as a means for identifying the type of register and discourse for creating the objectives and materials. It aims to draw. Yes, can you go back? It aims to draw a connection, okay, between target situation and the content of the ASP course. The second one is skills-centered course design. It aims to discover the potential knowledge and abilities that the learners bring to the ASP course so as to provide the essential competence that enables people to act or perform in the target situation. So here we try to discover what knowledge, what abilities, for example, those students have in mind, okay, before taking that ASP course. Learning-centered course design is this approach encompasses what knowledge and skills students would prefer to develop. It therefore puts the learner at the center of syllabus design and materials design, and the learner is responsible for the learning process. So here it's like we develop autonomous learning, so which means that we give the students the voice, okay, to express themselves, okay, and to give a say in in designing the ASP course. And it is one of the very interesting ASP course design that should be used while designing the ASP course. So the learning-centered course design is very fundamental because it puts the learner at the center of the designing syllabus and teaching materials. So needs analysis in ASP has been critiqued in a number of issues. Some of the criticism issues are, so this is one of the main pitfalls, I would say, or criticism for needs analysis, is that the information too often comes from the institutions themselves. And this is according to Outbreak 1995. The information too often comes from the institution themselves, who already have definite expectations about what students should be able to do, and thus needs analysis serves the interests of the institution, often at the expense of the learner. So which means that what happens is that sometimes, or some institutions, they don't give the chance to students to express themselves or to say what they would like to study, but the institutions, they already have a ready-made teaching material, they have a ready-made textbook. It could be, for example, an in-house material. And they also tell us, for example, the ASP teacher this is how to evaluate students, this is what to teach, this is not what to teach, and so on and so forth. So which means that it does not give students time, or it does not give them voice to express themselves in terms of what to study and what not to study. So now I will move to research that I conducted, as I said earlier, which is related to my PhD thesis. So the ultimate, so it's about ASP in Morocco, prospects and employability. This ultimate objective of conducting this research is to investigate the needs, okay, of students and employers at the level of language skills, soft skills, and content, and also to find out the main challenges that Moroccan ASP teachers face in teaching ASP courses. So, and the students are Moroccan engineering students. They belong to schools such as INSA in Fes, INSA in Wijda, INSA in Meknes, Mohammedia School of Engineers in Rabat, INIM in Rabat, and INSA in Agadir. And in this research design, I opted for a mixed method in which I combine between qualitative and quantitative approach. Concerning the main research instruments used are the questionnaire and the semi-structured interview. And the data were analyzed using SPSS. Concerning quantitative data, I used SPSS as a software program to analyze the data, and I opted for descriptive and inferential statistics. Concerning descriptive statistics, I used the standard deviation and the mean. And concerning inferential statistics, I used independent sample t-test and chi-square test of independence. So the independent sample t-test was used to compare the means of two groups, okay, and the chi-square test was used to see the relationship between categorical variables that we are going to see in a few minutes. Concerning the qualitative instrument, which is the semi-structure interview, so I used thematic analysis as a way or as a way to analyze those qualitative data. The main research questions are, the first one, is there any significant difference between the needs of students and employers at the level of language skills? Is there any significant difference between the needs of engineering students and employers at the level of soft skills? And we'll talk about soft skills, so it's leadership, communication, management, critical thinking, problem solving. So I choose a list of soft skills, and I ask them what are the needs, what are their needs, what are the main language skills that you would like to improve, and what are the main soft skills that they wish to improve. And this question was addressed to employers and students and working engineering students. Concerning, by the way, concerning employers, so they are from different companies in Morocco, the one in Meknes, one in Fez, and others in Tangier and Casablanca. The third main research question is there any statistical significant difference between the needs of students and employers at the level of course content? And then the fourth research question, which is to what extent does the English course satisfy Moroccan engineering students? And is there any significant difference between students' affiliation and their satisfaction at the level of time devoted to English courses, assessment, teaching methods, materials used, and the overall English course? So concerning the first, the third, the second, and the third, so I used descriptive and inferential statistics, and I used independent sample t-test. But the last question, research question, so I used chi-square test of independence to see whether there is a relationship between two variables, which are students' affiliation and their time devoted to English course, and then on the students' affiliation assessment, students' affiliation teaching methods, students' affiliation teaching materials, and so on. So I use also cross-tabulation to see the percentages in terms of students' interests, students' satisfaction, whether they are satisfied with this main items, which are English course, assessment, teaching methods, materials, and the English course in general. Yes, please. Concerning the main findings, by the way, if I missed to talk about the hypothesis, so all of them, so I opted for alternative hypothesis. There is a difference between the needs of students and employers. There is a difference between students and employers at the level of language skills, soft skills, and content. And also, student satisfaction is not independent, okay, on assessment, English courses, teaching methods, materials, and the overall course. So they are all alternative hypotheses, and of course the null hypothesis is the opposite. Yes, please. Concerning the main findings of this study, I found that while testing the relationship between the needs of students and employers, so the p-value is below the typical level, means that the needs of students at the level of language skills is different from the needs of employers. When we talk about language skills, so all productive and receptive skills, speaking, reading, writing, and listening. So the same thing for language sub-skills at the level, for example, each language sub-skill, for example, speaking, I opted for many other items that are related to sub-skill, like, for example, interviewing, like debate, like discussion, and so on and so forth. So there is a difference between the needs of students and employers also at the level of language skills, which means that what students would like to improve at the level of language skills and soft skills is different from what employers would like those would-be engineers should improve after graduation. Yes, yes, please. The next finding, can you go back, please? The third finding concerning whether there is a relationship between needs of students and employers at the level of soft skills. So the p-value, okay, of the independent sample thesis is below the typical level, means that there is a difference also at the level of soft skills. So the same thing for content. So the p-value of independent sample thesis is below the typical level, means that there is a difference also in terms of what students would like to improve and what employers wish their engineers improve after graduation. Yes, please. Concerning testing student satisfaction, while using or when I run the chi-square test, I found that students are not satisfied with the time allotted to English. So they are not satisfied. Most of the time, most of students, or the majority of students, are not satisfied with the time allotted to English. They are not satisfied with teaching methods adopted. They are not satisfied with assessment, the way they were assessed. The same thing for teaching materials. So all the teaching materials, so the majority, they are not satisfied. Even the overall course, the ESP course, so they are not satisfied. So the p-value is below the typical level. So it's 0.91 for time to allotted to English. So teaching method, so it's 0.773. Assessment, its p-value is 0.794. Teaching materials, so it's 0.320, and the overall ESP course, so it's PO 0.089. So which means that there is no relationship between affiliation and student satisfaction of time allotted to English, teaching methods, assessment, teaching materials, and overall ESP course. Yes. Concerning the challenges that many ESP teachers they come up while teaching ESP courses is that, and by the way, ESP teachers, they belong to probably the same institutions. So it's INSA, École Mohammed des Ingénieurs, l'ENA. So these are the main schools where those ESP teachers teach. So the main challenge is heterogeneous groups. It means that they claim that students, there is no homogeneity in classes. So students, so they have a problem of homogeneous groups. Students' motivation, many students are not motivated to take ESP courses. Also individual differences. So there is a problem with individual differences. They don't know, or they have a problem of treating students differently, resources, financial resources, and also training. They claim that they need intensive or pre-service, for example, pre-service training before taking ESP course, because when I ask them, the majority, whether they teach ESP, many of them claim that they just opt for AGP instead of ESP. It's because of students' level, it's because of students' motivation, and so on and so on. And also because sometimes many of them are not familiar with what to teach at the level of ESP exactly. For example, engineering, they don't know whether to teach English for engineering or English for business or. Yes, please. Concerning the main applications that we can draw from this study is that students should be aware of their needs and be responsible for their learning in ESP. So their students should be aware of their needs, okay? And the teachers should take into consideration the needs of students. The appropriate way to advance students' language skills is to adopt student-centered approach to teaching, and this is very fundamental. So concerning teaching methods, the teacher should be eclectic while choosing teaching methods, and they should use, for example, CLT, problem-based approach, task-based approach, content-based approach, so which are the appropriate and the alternative teaching methods that can develop and can enhance students' language skills, soft skills, and content. Soft skills become a necessity, and they are critical in the job market because the majority or all, or I would say the socioeconomic sector in this modern time don't need graduates who are just technically knowledgeable, but they should also have these kinds of soft skills. You should know how to communicate. You should know how to use their critical thinking, their problem-solving skill, their communication as well. So these are the most widely needed skills in the socioeconomic sector. And most, I would say, or all of them, all employers enforce, or they reinforce on students to improve these kinds of skills. It is essential to design the ESP syllabi in order to bridge the gap and to enhance skills and content desired by students and contemporary employers, because the job of the ESP teacher is to meet the needs of students and also the needs of the job market, rather than just meeting his or her perceived needs. Conducting needs assessment paves the way for better teaching materials, teaching methods, teaching techniques, teaching strategies, and assessment. So it should be, needs assessment should be an ongoing process, okay? And it should be in the beginning, in the end, and also at the end of the ESP course. The main recommendations that we can draw from this study is that practitioners should use up-to-date teaching methods in order to enhance and cultivate the language skills and soft skills. Collaboration between ESP teachers and content teachers can increase the knowledge of vocabulary and content in ESP. So it should be always collaboration between ESP teachers and the content teachers. Students should be evaluated in authentic situations. So there should be a shift from just evaluating students in written course, written way, but there should be other ways of evaluating students. For the quality of ESP courses, more time should be devoted to ESP courses. Create an association of ESP teachers. Here in Morocco, for example, there should be creation of an ESP, an association of ESP for teachers, where they can conduct, for example, annual seminars, conferences, and workshops, and so on and so forth. As a conclusion, we can say that the teaching and learning of English as a second or foreign language, where the goal of the learners is to use language in a particular domain. So this is ultimately what is ESP. A key feature of an ESP course is that the content and aims of the course are oriented to the specific needs of the learners. And ESP courses then focus on the language skills and genre appropriate to the specific activities the learners need to carry out in English. So that's it. Thank you very much. And I hope that I haven't taken too much time for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Saadin Akhjam, for this outstanding presentation. Please,
if you have any questions, comments, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Please, Professor KARFA, shall we proceed for a discussion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fatem Zara. I would like to thank Saadin Akhjam for his enlightening presentation about different components and issues and questions, challenges involved in ESP courses, needs analysis, their design, teaching materials, maybe teachers, education, ESP teachers, etc. I think you give the floor to our students and colleagues to ask questions and interact with Saadin, and maybe to add some remarks and some more informative ideas about ESP. I give the floor to colleagues and students.
Thank you very much.
Students and PhD students, yeah. Okay, Fatem Zara.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now we open the floor for a discussion for our dear students and professors who would like to give their additions and comments and ask questions. The floor is yours. Yes, Mr. Bqali.
Thank you so much, Lila Fatem Zara. Thank you so much, Saadin. I would like also to thank Professor Abderrahim and Professor Suad Slawi for this continuous outstanding and informative sessions and webinars through which we learn a lot, through which we come up with such community. I think, to be honest, this is one of the best presentations, simply because I feel like it's rarely it's rare that we find out people speaking about ESP with this let's say layout. I think why it's very important, because every institute today is lagging behind establishing certain structure for the development of the learning skills. In Morocco, we can speak about a great need for ESP, and this year we have been speaking a lot about the new projects that Morocco tends to implement, which is the Moroccan Bachelor, which was supposed to be the beginning of this year, but it's a little bit postponed one year to 2021. And I think in these new projects of the Bachelor, we find out that the ESP has enough room for Moroccan learners across universities and specializations and fields, because this is the way out to establish and investigate, as Dean mentioned in his informative presentation, the strength and the weaknesses of our learners. Also, I think when you speak about the strategy analysis, it means that you open the floor for a developed way of learning. However, I think, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, Dean, that ESP is much more digitalized and computerized, in the sense it doesn't allow and give enough room for the students to perform well in terms of communicative skills. Because we tend to have ESP as a way to either evaluate or develop or investigate or even invest in the learner's accuracy side, or let me say the accurate side of the learning process. However, the communicative side is still missing there in the ESP, let's say, process. This is why I think that even when we speak about DSP, we still have to look for other ways to develop the learner's needs. Since you speak about the needs analysis, you're putting let's say a platform of the needs analysis or the learner's needs, but to what extent you include the communicative part of it, it's missing there. To what extent, Dean, we can wisely integrate this, let's say, technique of testing or evaluating or looking for the needs of the learner, which concerns the communicative part. To what extent? And I think apart from this very little question, I feel like that you have given a very illuminative presentation. Thank you so much. That really matters a lot in this series of webinars. Thank you so much, Lila Fatima Zara. It has been very extremely wonderful that you are leading this the moderation of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Abqali.
Yes, Fatima Zara.
Yes.
Yeah, Abdelmajid Jamei.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor Abdelmajid Jamei. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fatima Zara.
Yes,
I would like to thank Professor KARFA for his patience and guidance and help and everything. Professor Slawi, Professor Bakali, doctoral students and master students. Thank you all for your job. Thank you, Saadin, for your presentation. It's very informative, insightful, and very interesting in the domain of ELT. I can I don't want to speak a lot about this because I have shared my article, and I hope it will be beneficial for master students to read and then to give feedback. So my question or my suggestion is very brief. So this is a question for all, not for only Saddin. Do you think that we need professors who are specialized in ESP, who can teach ESP course, or EGP professors, which means English for general purposes? So professors of English for general purposes can do the job with a degree, of course, of satisfying the needs of students. Because I remember one of the policymakers last year, he said that we don't have specialized professors in higher education who can teach ESP, which is very problematic. So do we need, for example, if we, I'm not talking about faculties of letters and human sciences, I'm talking about, let's say, l'UST, for example, the higher school of technology. So if a professor coming from the faculty of letters, can he or can she teach ESP in a perfect way? And then he or she can satisfy the needs of the students. So I'd like everyone to reflect on this question and then to share ideas. And thank you very much, Fatim Zara.
Thank you, Professor.
Fatim Zara?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah. Can I speak?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor, for this illuminating and inspiring presentation. I have just one suggestion or recommendation along what Professor Abdelrahim Jamei said. This concerns designing textbooks. Don't you think that the idea of designing textbooks according to the needs of those students and to the needs of the job market will be in favor of those students? A textbook that will be designed by people who have experience and expertise in this field and the study. And thank you very much. This is just a suggestion, a recommendation to which I would like to have your own reaction and feedback about. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, Fatim Zara,
Yes.
please.
Yes, Iman, Miss Iman.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. It is a great pleasure to be with you again. Thank you very much to Professor KARFA for this very beneficial webinar series. And thank you very much to Professor Saadin Ahjan for the very instructive and insightful presentation. I actually have 3 questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, what can you tell us, Professor Saadin Ahjan, about ESP in the digital era? The second question is, to what extent can ESP training courses for ESP teachers impact ESP learners' motivation? And the third question is, what are some of the tasks included in ESP textbooks which may help teachers in assessing the communicative skills of learners? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Iman. Miss Iman. Yes. Yes, the floor is yours.
So
Hello, can I speak?
Shall I react or shall we wait for?
Yes.
I just have one addition to what the participants have mentioned. I can tell you from experience that sometimes students may not be motivated enough to learn English because it is considered for them as an additional language, and they tend to focus more on the subjects that are in their discipline. You see what I mean? So here there is an issue of motivation. And concerning the remark on the profile of teachers who can teach ESP, I can say that if teachers do not undergo like autonomous training before joining some some schools, etc., they cannot teach ESP because, for example, I'm just an example of teaching English for law students. There are different terms that teachers and even practitioners cannot know if they don't study them and they do not study the content, if they are not familiar with the law. Okay, for example, just there are some salient differences between, for example, junha, jinaya, mukhalafa, in terms of legal English, the difference between sijin, yani prison and jail. So these are differences. For example, I'm talking to you about teachers who teach terminology to law students, and they teach terminology via translation from Arabic to French to English, etc. So I do agree with the training, and because training is not currently available, what I suggest is autonomous training. That's it, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benhima. Yes. Yes, please, Professor Khajem.
Can you react to?
Yes.
All right, so first of all, I would like to express my thanks once again to all students, professors who reacted to my presentation. I would like also to thank you for your very prominent questions. Well, so far I have received a number of questions that are related to assessment, teaching methodology, and also teaching materials. So I will try to answer these questions from a research perspective and from, I would say, personal experience, because I have taught an ESP class for more than 3 years, and I worked at École Mohammedia des Ingénieurs for 3 years. And concerning the idea of communicative way of evaluating students, this is the question that was addressed by Sid Qali. Well, concerning this question, it's always when we talk about communicative or evaluating students communicatively, so it's improving or it's testing students' speaking skill. And I would suggest, or the appropriate way to evaluate students in speaking skill is through, for example, delivering presentations. It could be also through, for example, discussions. So there should be a shift from just evaluating them through written tests to, for example, delivering presentations, or for example, reports. And what he did, for example, in an ESP class in one semester with students is just adopting project-based approach where students conducted projects and they delivered their projects in a form of presentation. So this is, I would say, the appropriate or the alternative way or the appropriate way to test students communicatively. Do we need ESP teachers? Concerning your question, it's not a question of having a profile of a PhD holder who is specialized in ESP, but is at least you should know that ESP is different from AEP and EGP. Because what happens is that when we indulge in an EGP context or an EEP context is that, for example, he is familiar, that teacher is familiar with just teaching EEP courses, and when it comes to EEP, ESP contexts, so he's following the same strategy, the same, I would say, the same courses. For example, if he knows that students, sometimes they give much focus to accuracy, sometimes rather than fluency, and the much focus on grammar, much focus on, and sometimes when you ask those students, they would say, no, we're not interested in grammar, but we need to improve our knowledge in the field. So it's not a question of having a profile or having someone who is specialized in ESP, but at least needs to be familiar, is to know, to read about, to study about the field. And this is what I said earlier, that the ESP practitioner is not just having a degree in ESP, but is someone who knows that that this is how to evaluate, that ESP is based on needs analysis, that ESP is based on meeting the needs of students, is not his or her perceived needs. It's about giving students voice to express themselves, to give a say in the ASP course. Concerning Professor Slawi, for the question of textbook, it's not just design. This is, I will talk from my personal experience as an ASP teacher. When I worked with students at IMI in the first year, I had a textbook. It's an in-house material. It's a published textbook, but I didn't impose on them the textbook. I didn't say this is the textbook that we are going to adopt. But what I did is that I tried to use in-house and tailor-made material, because there is a difference between in-house materials and tailor-made materials. So which means, and this is the job of the ASP teacher, is to combine or to use both in-house materials and tailor-made materials. So for example, if I know the textbook is or it meets the needs of the students, I can adopt it. But of course, I should give them margin, I should give them time, I should give them also enough space to use other, for example, teaching materials. Probably I will design my own PowerPoint presentations. I will design, for example, my own handouts and so on and so forth. And for example, concerning this textbook, I said, this is the textbook that you are going to adopt. And I give it to students, and I ask them to ask whether they would like to work on the textbook, because of course I try to meet the needs of students. And also I suggest many other teaching materials, and we agreed on that working on this textbook in this part, and then we are going to work on other issues. So adopting blindly the textbooks is not accepted to some extent in ASP course. And in fact, we don't need to design just a textbook for this group of learners and another textbook for other group of learners, but rather to have, for example, a textbook for example, English for engineering students, or English for catering, or English for business. But at the same time, it's using other teaching materials that could be, they are tailor-made, that could be addressed to those students.
Yeah, that's the point I would like to make, Professor. I mean, you need a textbook for a specific institution, and of course, you will be flexible to use other materials to enrich and to meet the needs of those students. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. This is what should be done. Yes, yes. It's having a textbook, of course, that should be adopted. But we should, as ASP teacher, he is not in favor to adopt it blindly. But there should be some flexibility of using other teaching materials.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Fatim Zahra, can I?
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor Jamil.
Yeah, thank you.
One question concerning training, Jamil.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Concerning training, yes, the question that is addressed, I forgot his name, whether Si Mohammed, yes? Mohammed will ask the question.
Yes,
with his experience with law students.
Yes.
Yes, of course. So concerning training, I consider it is something that is, I would say, fundamental, because as I said to Sergid, it's sometimes, though someone who is good, he has got a very good profile, is, for example, degree in certain field, in cultural studies, for example, in media studies, or I don't know, in ALT or in applied linguistics in general. But you should always know what are the things that you should be used to, or that should be taught to those students. But what happens most of the time in Morocco, for example, let's be practical, is that what happens is that many institutions, they hire what is called part-time teachers. And what happens is that those part-time teachers, they don't, not all of them, I would say, some of them, they don't do the job as it should be, means that they don't teach ESP. It's because they are not well trained. I would say intensive or pre-service training, yes, but as Mohammed said, also is autonomous training as well. So autonomous training is very fundamental. So this is another alternative, since in Morocco, we don't have any intense in-service trainings for teachers who teach at the university or institutions like, for example, engineering schools or EST or other institutes, but at least you should try to read about or to train himself on what teaching methods, at the level of teaching methodology, at the level of assessment, at the level of teaching materials, and so on and so forth. Miss Iman, you asked 3 main questions, but I couldn't remember all of them. Testing, I think you talked about testing, I guess.
Yes, Professor?
Could you repeat the 2 first questions? You talked about testing and...
Okay, I'll repeat my questions. So the first one is, please, what can you tell us about ESP in the digital era? The second one is, to what extent can ESP training courses for ESP teachers impact ESP learners' motivation? And the third one is, what are some of the tasks in ESP that may help teachers in assessing the communicative skills of learners?
Well,
thank you very much.
So concerning motivation, yes, thank you very much for your questions, Iman. Well, concerning motivation, so to motivate students, the first thing is that the teacher should be or should do the job appropriately. I give you, for example, I can't, for example, if I am teaching or I'm indulging in an ESP class, and for example, I don't teach things that are relevant or that don't meet the needs of the students, definitely those students will be demotivated. So which means that I should do my job as ESP teacher in the sense that I should do things as it should be at the level of teaching methodology, at the level of teaching materials, at the level of meeting individual differences, so that students will be motivated. So, and the second thing is that, of course, if a student is not intrinsically motivated, he won't be extrinsically motivated. So this is obvious, but at least the ESP teacher is always doing he should always do his job. Okay, so as of course you motivate students, but also students intrinsic motivation is very fundamental. So you cannot motivate a demotivated student. So this is, I would say, as it's a role of motivation in ALT in general and in ESP in particular. And in this modern time, in this digital era, yes, well, ESP is not critically related to digitalization, but it's in fact is just teaching what students will need in the job market. It's of course, using ICT in the classroom is very significant, and it is interesting in an ESP class, because in the literature and one of the teaching methods or one of the teaching materials is the use of ICT in the ESP class. So which means that ICT is very significant, and I think Abderrahim did his job in distance learning and so on. So in this modern time, so being digitally knowledgeable is very fundamental in ALT in general and ESP in particular. And it is of course very fundamental, and the implementation, the use of ICT in ESP class is critical.
Thank you very much, Professor Saadine Akhjam, for your insightful clarification. Please, Professor Jamei, could you, yes.
You have the floor.
Have the floor. Yes, Professor Jamei.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, yeah, I'd like, just to come back, to the idea, discussed by Professor Slawi about textbook design. Sometimes we, as teachers of ESP, we depend on the objectives that are included in the guidelines, which means textbook design for ESP course. Sometimes it is institutional. So which means ESP teachers, they have to adopt so what is written within the guidelines. He has to respect the guidelines. Because investing in ESP teachers, as Si Mohammed bin Hima said, talking about the teacher's profile and then investment in this issue, it's highly demanding. It's very expensive, you know, to speak about TSP teachers in Morocco. But the best way, I think, in my opinion, to deal with ESP course or classroom, it is to set a first meeting interview. Sometimes you can, as Said said before, the ad hoc analysis is to set some questions, and then you can ask students. The first question, of course, they have to introduce themselves and then to know about their profiles, and then to ask them, what would you like to study? But this question is very tricky because you have to be careful as a teacher, because students, they may have a negative attitude about you from the first beginning. Yeah, because it seems to be for them that you don't know what to teach as a teacher.
Yes.
But you are doing an interview which is not written, but it should be oral. So what kind of needs your students have? But I said it's very risky, you know, to ask this question, but you have to be careful. So which means the teacher's experience is very interesting to deal with an ESP course. And thank you very much, Iman, and thank you, Saadin.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Fatim Zara. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Fatim Zara, can I speak?
Yes, of course.
First of all, thank you, Professor KARFA. Thank you, Professor Slawi, for your efforts to keep work going on. Thank you very much, Professor Hajam, for your insightful and very informative presentation. Many questions, in fact, have been raised. And just to shed light on some questions or to comment on some questions, especially the question of Professor Abdelmajid Jami, talking about training for teachers of English for specific purposes. So I think that training is a must-have. Of course, as Professor Akhjam mentioned, there should be pre-service training and autonomous training. And one of my classmates, I think, has talked about translation. And that's a very pertinent example. Not all professors can teach, for example, translation. And we all know the intricacies that lie there in translation, especially when we talk about legal translation, economic translation. So I believe that a professor who is assigned, for example, to teach one of these disciplines has to be well-versed and well-grounded in the field he is or she is to teach, because
Yes, is there any questions?
Yes, Fatim Zara?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Is there any questions?
Can I join this this discussion?
Yes, Professor, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I have been smiling because I'm hearing, can I speak, and I remember the article of Gayatri Spivak, can the subaltern speak? Yes, we can, yeah, we can, everybody can speak. Okay, so in 2006, I delivered a presentation at the 26th National Conference of Mates in Tangier. And I was curious about sustainable development. And I did some research, and I was, by the way, at the time, a new teacher, 2 years experience. And I thought, why not writing or presenting on education for sustainable development? Education for sustainable development, or sustainable education. And how can English language education in Morocco, English language education in general, how it can best contribute to achieve the sustainable goals, developmental goals of of our country, and how it can contribute to bridging the gap, or at least one of the gaps that exist between education and education institutions and the socio-economic sector, that is the job market. Now we are using another concept which is a bit nice, which is employability, not employment, but employability. How can English language education contribute to employability, youth and graduates integration in the job market, and contribute to improvement of our education system, which is the one of the most important fundamentals for our country to integrate into knowledge society and economy. So I wrote some on sustainable development, why education for sustainable development, why English education for sustainable development. And the second part of my presentation, I had to give some implications. One of the implications, and at the time I was still a very noisy person, and curious and very noisy, Today I'm noisy, I'm not very noisy. I was very noisy, very critical, and I suggested the omission, the deletion of what had been called and referred to English outside department. At the time I said that this English outside department had been the worst. Fill in the gap exercise. It is the worst. It had no value. I have just said that I was very noisy and very critical. So I suggested the omission of outside department, English outside department, because it was some sort of filling the gap, filling the blanks, or filling the gap, and the gap was not filled. And they suggested the need for, and I was talking about the faculties of, about institutions of higher education, not only the faculties of letters and human sciences. I suggested the need to teach, the need for English for specific communicative purposes. Of course, I was influenced and by my PhD topic, which was CLT in Morocco, communicative language teaching in Morocco, theory and practice. So I wanted at the time that everything is communicative, and I wanted to create something. And I added ESCP, English for specific communicative purposes. And I argued that learners, students' needs are communicative in essence and in nature, regardless or whatever the component of language or the skill of language is given priority. Reading, and writing and listening and speaking. Either it is vocabulary or it is grammar. At the time, as I said, I looked at most of the issues from a communicative. Even grammar can be taught from a communicative perspective. We can use a communicative approach to teach grammar, to teach vocabulary, listening, reading, everything was communicative for me, okay? That's English for specific communicative purposes, yes, because learners' needs are communicative in a sense, and employers' needs are communicative in a sense. So I suggested something else. I considered at the time that giving an ESP course to a full professor at the age of, I don't know, 50 or 55, something he or she is not prepared for. We do it because we are paid. Yes, many of us may do it. They are motivated to do it as part-time teachers. They do it if they are well paid, okay? Then I suggested that, and I argued that it is a waste of time. And it is a waste of human resources. Why? I thought, and I still think, and I am ready to argue that the Ministry of Higher Education should recruit 100 at most, 100 the graduate students or students holding their baccalaureate from a science background, natural sciences, sciences naturelles, physics, mathematics, who are not so good at maths and science and physics, but who are good at English. And we have many, by the way, in the Department of English, we have many students who came from scientific branches, but they are good at English. And to train them for 2 years, 3, 4 years at most on ESP by trainers who are specialized in ESP and different branches of ESP. English for medicine, English for engineering, and within English for engineering, we have different branches. I have textbooks here. English for electronics, English for mechanics, English for, because I taught at AST and I taught somewhere else, okay? And I was a teacher of ESP between inverted comma. When I was at the multidisciplinary faculty of TESA outside the department, I taught legal English, business English, English for science, biology, physics, chemistry, and so on, okay? We will save money and increase quality because those students coming from a scientific background, those from sciences naturelles, can do the job at the Faculty of Medicine. At least they have basic notions, and they have that more scientific background. They will do the job better than me and many other professors. Because many professors think they teach ASP, but they use a reading comprehension text that they use with, okay, it is about literature. We don't have ASP teachers in Morocco. We have teachers teaching ASP. No one is trained, with the exception, for the moment, I think, Sa'd Abderrahim Belkbir is with us. She is conducting her PhD, I think, under the supervisor, Professor Madani, on ASP. That's good. Yes, sir. She has written, yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. With Professor Madani on ASP. But if we ask them whether they are at ease teaching, yes, if they will be happy to teach at an engineering institution or at national schools of commerce, most of them will say no. Why? Because their academic identity, this is another problem that teachers of ASP at this kind of institutions are not so happy. Okay? They're not happy. Their academic identity, their identity as researchers who are expected to conduct research and to publish, etc. Their institutional position within that institution and the bodies of those institutions, they are at the margins. I was at the margins, and at the center at the same time for personal reasons, okay? Because I personally, I have never accepted being at the margins. I was very noisy, once again. But we didn't feel that we are part of the institution, that sense of belonging as researchers. One. Second, people don't understand what we do as teachers of English, professors of English. They think we are local guides or rural guides or teachers of English, which is not this. So that is most of them. If there is one with us, he can tell me the opposite. These are not personal experiences. They are about teachers training. Another problem. Professors, most of professors do not have that culture of training. Because a professor knows everything. He should be the training. He or she can train everybody. This is a matter of culture. We do not have training. It's not easy for us. Why? For cultural reasons, and because the trainings are not always serious. They are not so motivated. So the problem that we have been discussing is that of teachers training. 100 graduates recruited for how many faculties of medicine we have in Morocco? 3, 4, okay? To teach our future doctors the English they need to conduct research and to keep learning to become lifelong learners. How many projects how many engineering schools we have in Morocco? We have some 2 or 3 or 4 in Rabat, and we have les EST and l'INSA, etc. How many? 2 graduate students, experts, equipped with high quality training program for 1 year. They will satisfy the need. We have been talking about ESP and bridging the gap between this and this and this and this, but that's nothing. In 2 years, 3 years, we can prepare this. Okay. They will do the job. They will do an excellent job. Instead, this job, a full officer who is expected to do research, to supervise and to guide PhD and master students, and to teach something. He will not excel in. He or she doesn't have time. He or she doesn't have the skill and the competency to do it. You have to spend maybe 10 minutes to pronounce some medicine vocabularies, to understand them. We don't have those basic notions. Another problem is that of, and I didn't talk about this, is that of textbooks and teaching materials. Okay, authentic teaching materials and textbooks, yes. We have textbooks, no problem. How much time does it consume to appropriate, to engineer your own course, to make it teachable and learnable, to appropriate it? There are textbooks produced in or designed for English as a second language. It's different. It's different. We have to do a lot of years to appropriate it, to make it appropriate to our context, which consumes too much time. Authentic materials. Yes. So the teacher should become a course designer teacher. So his responsibility is or becomes a burden, new responsibilities, and he is not equipped, which is worse. So for something else is English for general purposes, they have something in common. Ce qu'on appelle tronc commun, a common track. For example, for a businessman or businesswoman, is not a businessman or a businesswoman 24 hours out of 24 hours. If an engineer is participating at a conference or business meeting or whatever abroad, he or she will not do business the whole day. He or she will give her presentation, participate at a meeting, take her turn for 5 minutes, or I don't know, to negotiate. We have negotiation. We have socializing. We have socializing today. Today's business, science, whatever. In addition to those 20 minutes presenting, what is more important than the content of your presentation is how to build up relationships, how to connect, how to build partnerships. And these things are usually successful if one is successful at coffee breaks and social and lunch and dinner times. Okay? So it is not completely isolated. One should use English to apologize, invite, to ask, to talk about his country if he's abroad, about his company, about his culture, traditions, etc. Socializing, networking is and should be a common component, and it is very important. Okay, so these are some of for needs analysis in our context. Yassi Saadin has talked about it in details, and he conducted research on that. But he didn't talk about the difficulties he encountered as a response on ASP. He did not. Maybe it is not okay. The of information to decide the needs are students, yeah, and employers. Do employers in Morocco and can employers in Morocco determine, describe the needs of their companies? I will leave this question open. Do they have that research mindset? Most of them have common sense impressions about research, do not believe in research. They have a negative attitude towards higher education and higher education institutions. They do not respect PhD students when they come to them to collect data. When it's time for them, at least, to receive those students, to allow them access to information. Okay? So, but in spite of all this, ASP is an emerging need in Morocco to increase employability of graduates. It is also important if a fruitful partnership between higher education and higher education institutions and socio-economic sector to be built up and sustained. It is also important not only for graduates, but those who are in employees themselves, who would like to update their competencies and skills, those working in the field of tourism, and those who are working in industry and in different services and sectors. This is the job market that our universities should be open on. Not only this is in universities, to be open on employees who would like, in different sectors, who would like to develop their skills and competencies in different areas, including English language. So I think institutions of higher education should be competitive on these sectors. This way, thinking about ESP and the ESP practice may become part of the mainstream practices prevalent in higher education in Morocco. Thank you very much, Saadeddin. I tried to just interact with my colleagues and students about some issues that I think are important. But Saadeddin is now one of the experts in ASP in Morocco. Yes, you know, when one conducts his PhD on a subject, so you know, he knows the details, and he found some difficulty to summarize and to give us as much as possible, as much as possible. Thank you very much, Saadeddin. And thank you very much, Fatim Zahra.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insightful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your great moderation.
Thank you. Please, Professor, have a question.
Thank you so
you
much
did it better than me. Remember the names. Okay, so you can, yes, you know who is there, and okay, I didn't. Okay, I'm still learning how to see who is in, who has left. Yes, thank you very much, Fatim Zahra.
Thank you very much.
Fatim Zahra, can I speak?
Yes, of course, please.
Yes, thank you
Yeah,
very
Professor
much.
Saaded, can the subaltern speak?
Thank you very much. So
Thank you
first
very
of
much.
all, thank you very much, Professor Saadeddin, for your insightful presentation. Thank you very much, Professor KARFA. Right, I think that we're sharing the same opinions about ESP teachers and the concept of ESP in Morocco. Thank you very much, Fatim Zahra. You are doing a great job. I congratulate you. So for me, I would just like to share my points with my colleagues about ESP. As you all know, ESP is meaning specific curriculum. ESP meaning particular jargon, characteristic of each specific occupational context. ESP meaning comprehensive needs analysis. ESP meaning particular textbooks and suitable authentic materials. ESP means much time devoted to content knowledge acquisition. But the issue that is usually raised is how prepared are we as teachers for teaching what often is called a challenging new task. I think that the real problem resides in the fact that teachers of EGP are not given much more time to test their effectiveness in ESP, to evaluate their teaching strategies, and to concentrate on the differences between performance and competence. What happens is that the teacher of ESP would like to achieve real-world objectives, but this requires specific timing and specific programs. The problem is that the 3 hours that are allotted to ESP, I'm speaking about faculties of letter and human sciences, okay? The 3 hours that are allotted to ESP in one semester, I mean just around 14 weeks, okay? I've been teaching English for tourism 3 hours per week for 14 weeks. I've been teaching English for business or business English, the same 3 hours per week and around 14 weeks. So, but there is no continuity of any ESP subject. I would say that we are just initiating students to ESP subject. At the end, how may we as teachers familiarize ourselves effectively with special subjects? I think that ESP is a practical discipline that requires more than what we as teachers of EGP are doing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sadani. Yes.
Can I say a word, please?
Yes, of course.
Well, thank you. All right. So, thank you so much, dear Professor KARFA, for this series of webinars. I really benefited a lot from all the webinars, and I would like also to thank Mr. or Professor Saad-Din for his very informative presentation on ESP. Of course, he's a specialist indeed. Well, I have a question that is quite similar to Professor Jamei's question, but tackles different the issue from a different angle. Well, my question is based on an article conducted, or a study conducted by Professor Mohan Naji, and entitled "The ESP Teacher in the Private and the Public Sectors." All right, so based on, of course, Mohan Naji's experience, he states that from the beginning that teaching ESP in the private sector is in many ways different from teaching in the public sector, okay? There is a difference between teaching ESP in the private sector and teaching ESP in the public sector. Of course, because the two sectors have distinct aims and objectives and different learning needs, they therefore require different techniques and methods of teaching. So what do you think, I don't know, this question is open for either Professor Saad or Professor KARFA. What do you think? Is there any difference between teaching ESP at the private sector and ESP in the public sector? I just want to share with you some of the problems that Professor Mohan Naji came up with, stating that most ESP teachers lack any serious and formal training in ESP. Time allotted, as Professor Sadani said, to ESP is rather insufficient. Classes suffer from overcrowding. Possibilities to practice English outside classes are, I would say, very limited. Evaluation of the oral skills. Exams are mainly oral. The objectives, goals, abilities, and needs of learners are standardized, and the specificity of each option or subject area is overlooked. So these are some of the problems that Professor Mohan Naji came up with in this article. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid.
Well, shall I react or give the floor to others to?
Please, Professor, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Please, Professor, you have mentioned that teachers, they put ad hoc interviews to figure out what are the needs of their students in order to improve their course material. So they give a voice to their students, and they, as well as for institutions, for example, they determine the textbooks on the professor. So in this respect, I would love to ask the question, can we say that ESP is a learner-centered approach? Because we have two things. We have the teachers who are like more learning-centered oriented, and the institutions who seek to meet the expectations of the job market. So please, Professor, what do you think?
All right, so I would like first of all to react to Professor KARFA's comments and question concerning my challenges that they face during my PhD or my journey in my PhD. Of course, concerning gathering data from the socioeconomic sector. Of course, it was not easy. It was very hard, and it was mind-boggling. I suffered a lot. So it took me too much time to interview and to deliver the questionnaire to employers. Of course, some of them, yes, they accepted with an open heart. And unfortunately, many others refused because, as you said, Professor KARFA, it's because many of them don't have a mindset, okay, concerning research, and even some of them they consider anything that could be asked for is a private, so they don't want to share this kind of privacy. Okay, so most of them, and they are afraid to provide any kind of sensitive question that may be addressed to them. Yes, of course, we don't have mindset. I agree. I suffered a lot, so it's not easy. Well, I don't want to be in my presentations. I didn't want to be a pessimist in the sense. I try to talk about all what is good, what is positive, and what is interesting in ESP, rather than focusing on what is challenging and what is problem. And of course, there is no research that is free from challenges and pitfalls and problems, because this is obvious. Concerning the idea of student-centeredness, and yes, of course, I totally agree that ESP is student-centered. But in Morocco, what happens most of the time is that when you are in an ESP institution,
Sometimes Zahra, Professor Saadin is having a problem with connection, I think.
Yes, Professor, I think so, yes.
Yes, he's here now.
Yes.
I'm sorry for the internet connection, so it goes up and down, you know. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, Professor.
All right. So I said that, yes, it happens always. There is a clash of the needs of students and the institutions. So, and this is one of the roles, I would say, I would add to the role of ESP, as I stated earlier, is that he should compromise. His job is not to meet his or her perceived needs. He should not meet 100% the needs of the institution. He should not meet 100% the needs of students. Of course, those students are studying for job market in this modern time. Believe me, that all employers that they ask, they totally believe that they need engineers who are not only knowledgeable in their field, but also they need to be good at English in different language skills and sub skills, as I stated, and also soft skills means that they are aware, they know that they don't need, because how it's most of the time they take interviews, and one of the interview we said, I think in one of the company is that when we take interviews with the novice engineers, when we ask them things related to English, so we find that they are very poor, okay, at the level of language skills and soft skills and so on. So which means that they take English language as a prerequisite. It's a sine qua non, okay, before being recruited. And they said also that they they don't hire graduates who are poor at English, okay, because they believe that all engineers are technically knowledgeable. Okay, so what makes distinction. Okay, well, what distinguishes one novice engineer from others is his or her mastery first of English language. Okay, and the second thing which they give much importance is soft skills. Is this candidate has got this kind of soft skills? Is he able to use his critical thinking? Is he able to solve immediate problems? Is he able to, does he have the characteristic of leadership? Okay, is he someone who can manage his time? So these are most of the time, these are the things they take into consideration at the day of the interview. And he confessed that some of them confess that they refuse, they reject, okay, and they don't accept candidates, engineers, okay, who are poor at either English language or soft skills. Yes, ESP is student-centered, 100% or 1000%. Okay, so it's student-centered, and the job of the ESP teacher is to meet the needs of students, and students in ESP class, they should be aware of their needs, and they should voice their own opinions. You should voice their own ideas, and they should be given a say in the ESP classroom. I would like to go back to one idea that said Majid concerning the idea of asking questions at the beginning of the session, and as he said, probably some students would say, no, what's happened? This person doesn't know anything. Why is he here if he doesn't know what you teach? And it happened to me for the first time, but I said, excuse me, it's not that they don't know what to teach, but it's because I would like to do this and that and that and that. In the first session, I have a list of things to be taught, okay? Which means that they should know at the beginning that if you are asking them what would like to study, it's not because I don't know what to teach, but I'm giving them the chance to express themselves, to choose, to select, to pick up what language skill, for example, what content that could be taught. It's, for example, let's take an example that, for example, it happened to me in EMI, in Rabat, because I taught for 3 years, and I taught a group of civil engineering students, S1, S2, and S3. Unfortunately, ESP is not given much interest in this institution because they just study English only for 3 semesters. So what I did in the first session is that I told them these are things that they will be teaching during the first semester, the second semester, and the third semester. So which means I provided things, for example, different content. So I said, we will focus on business communication, for example, and then we will move to English for engineering, and then we will, because the majority expressed very, I would say, in a very, they were in need of developing their speaking skill. So that's why I said that we will, for example, work on delivering presentations and conducting projects, doing discussions, doing debates, okay, and also kind of what is called dialogues, for example, and many others. So it was, most of the courses were authentic. So I tried to be authenticity were given much importance in those ESP classes. So which means that I told them these are things that will be taught, and they are free to choose whether to study, for example, English for engineering, English for business communication as content, whether you would like to study English for civil engineering, or you would like to study just English for engineering in general, because I was given to different disciplines in engineering, English civil engineering students, mechanical engineering students, and mineral engineering. So I asked these kinds of questions, which are what content to be taught. And I totally agree with Professor KARFA that it's high time to give ESP its due concern in Moroccan higher education, because if you go back to the literature in Morocco, of course, many articles were written, especially as Abdou said in one of the articles that are written by Simouhan Naji, and not only him, but many other made proceedings, because I read the article, I read many other articles that are published by Sizaki and Siwa Karim, also Professor and many others who have done ample efforts in the field of ESP, but unfortunately they were not research based. Okay, so I would say that it's high time to be given its due concern and really teach what should be thought in ESP, because as you said, Professor KARFA, that the new vision, the strategic vision, and as said also Sid Khaled, the strategic vision, the new reform gives much both this the new reform and the strategic vision give much importance to employability. So it's meeting the job market. So it's trying to teach what are things, things that are needed in the socioeconomic sector, because the socioeconomic sector also suffers a lot at the level of graduates who are not knowledgeable at the level, it's not in their field, but most of the time they suffer from these kinds of soft skills. This is the main problem, and these kinds of skills that should be given also importance in ESP. It's development, not only language skills, but also giving the chance to students to improve their, I would say, leadership skill, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, public speaking as well, and many other soft skills. Well, I think if I miss any questions, or I reiterate my thanks to Professor KARFA, and I would consider him as my spiritual father. I learned a lot from him when he was my supervisor, and he is a source of leadership and a source of inspiration. And really sometimes I feel words fail to thank you for everything you have done to me as a student of yours in PhD. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor Saadin Akhjam, for these insightful clarifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fatem Zahra, for moderating this webinar. You did a great job, and I wish you the best. And also I wish the best to all master students. And of course, teachers are very proud of you. And of course, you are very proud, of course, of your teachers, because you are the products of your teachers.
Thank you very much. Please, is there any questions?
Yes, Fatem Zahra, if there are no questions, we can close up this seminar. Okay?
Yes, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor KARFA. I would like to reiterate my gratitude for having chosen me, Professor, to chair this webinar session. I would like also to thank Professor Saadin Akhjam for being with us and illuminating us with these insightful presentations. Thank you very much, Professor, for this webinar, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatem Zahra. Before giving the floor to Professor Slawi to close up, I would like to congratulate you, Fatem Zahra, for your very good moderation. And thank you, Akhjam, for enlightening us on different issues in ASP, because your presentation, I know it is research-based, and it is very rich. You did a good job. You brought what we think and you thought are the essential components and issues of ESP. Once again, I would like to express my special thanks to Professor Slawi for the time and energy and patience, for her great efforts to make these seminars a successful experience. I would like to thank Professor Sadani and Professor Jami Abdelmajid and Professor Nadif and Professor Aziz Al-Baqqali and all the professors that have joined us during all the seminars, and I would like to thank my PhD students, our PhD students who have joined us: Rihan Belkbir, Tariq Bouqtib, Abtissam Tayyibi, and Monia Ghelmat, and many others. Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Professor Slawi to close up, to say a word and to close up this seminar. And of course, we will meet again on 4 seminars, one on gender pedagogies, which was postponed for some urgencies that Professor Karima Mshwat. Yes, I would like to thank Karima Belghiti. Yes, she is with us. Another one on critical thinking, teaching culture, applied linguistics and politics, and gender pedagogies. And we may have some others. Professor Slawi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor KARFA. A big thank you goes to our distinguished speaker, Professor Ahjan Saduddin, for this wonderful sharing of experience, of his experience with us and his expertise. We really learned a lot from it, and that's what we are really in need of, is to speak about field work, about experience of Moroccan scholars in the field. And also I'm glad to see this continuity. You have here Professor Slawi, who is the teacher of Professor KARFA, Professor KARFA, who is the teacher of Mr. Ahjan, and so on and so on. We have this continuity in these generations.
And
so we are building
also.
up.
My
yes.
supervisor also.
And your supervisor, yes, this continuity, this is what we are seeking to build up among our students. We are preparing this future
you are
generation.
the grandmother of some of them.
Sorry?
So you have become the grandmother of some of them, because you are the grandmother of my students, teachers.
Yes, yes, for sure, yeah, for sure. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, our dear colleagues from Morocco and outside, for joining us, for sharing foods of thoughts with us, and let us exchange knowledge and know from each other. Thank you, our dear students, for your serious work, hard work, and also for your patience. And we wish you the best of luck in your studies, and meet you, inshallah, next week, inshallah, within the next another webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Professor
sharing
Saad.
your knowledge with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye, and see you next.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, everybody.